As you can see with the smile on my face, we are so back, man. I'm so happy to have Eminence and Shadow back. Like, I miss this, man. It sucks this episode felt like 5 minutes, but, it's so good, man. It's so good. I love this show. Like, oh, I miss the humor. I miss the edginess of Sid. I miss the serious and unserious nature of it. I miss the VA work. I missed it all. It's so good to be back. It's so good, man. Oh, it's so good. Like, what an episode. What an amazing episode of Eminence and Shadow. And I'm going to play this brief little scene that I think perfectly represents just like Eminence and Shadow in its entirety. Because Sid's trying to have this really cool moment. He's trying to be edgy. He's like, I smell it. And as he says this, all the female characters in the room get shot. They're like, huh? What? And they're like looking around wondering if they're the ones that smell. And when you see this character, she starts spraying perfume on her. Like, dude, it speaks for itself. It's so good. Like, just seeing this scene, it's so unserious that I was like, yep, this is what I missed. I missed this show so much because it's like, it has a nice blend of just edgelord, one-liners, and comedy with it that really just, it does so well. Because this series, it knows what it is. It knows what type of story it is. Because it's not trying to be revolutionary. It's not trying to not be cliche. It used these cliches or funny little moments to its advantage to really just get people invested. And it's one of those shows that just give you so much entertainment and joy. And I think the very essence of media when we're wanting to watch or read something is to just have enjoyment, to have joy while looking at something or reading something. And I think that this series really does embody that, which kind of explains why it exploded out of nowhere, why so many people just really love the show, and why it became one of the most watched shows last year, because it was so good. It knew what it was, and it used it to its absolute benefit, and only really good writers could do something like that. Use absolute cliches and make it enjoyable, make people really just love what they're seeing. Eminence and Shadow really is just such a good show. And this opening sequence, like I said, really does represent that. Now, before I go any further and I talk about the synopsis and other little things of this episode, I do want to take a moment to say that I am still an anime only. At the end of Season 1, I said that I was probably going to read the light novel, but then Season 2 was announced, and I decided to push back on reading the light novel and wait for the release of Season 2 of Eminence and Shadow, because, I heard there wasn't a lot of content left, like a volume, maybe 2 volumes left to adapt, which really isn't that long. I don't think that Season 2 is going to be 20-something episodes long. I think it's only going to be 12 or 13 episodes this season, which is sad, because that means that we're probably not going to have a Season 3 for a good long while. I hate to be the bearer of bad news on that, but that's my assumption. But anyways, the thing is, I decided to push back on reading the original source content. I will eventually read the original source, but I wanted to wait for the anime, because I fell in love with the anime, I love the voice acting, and I think one of the things that drew a lot of people to really starting this show for the first time, if they didn't start with episode 1, was basically hearing maybe a clip of I Am Atomic from Shadow. That clip was definitely trending. I know for a fact, it was trending all in the anime community. People, were talking about this character that literally said I Am Atomic and explodes like a nuke. It really was something that blew everyone away, just with how over the top the power was. And so I think that, the VA work and all that really does help the show considerably, and I think that this episode really does have some absolute incredible VA work, and I think that the studio that was working on this show, they realized that one of the big drawing factors of why people liked the show last year probably was the VA work, and I think even to the minor characters, to the side characters, and, the main characters, everybody had some really good one-liners or just lines in general that really came off very well. I think the voice acting was absolutely top-notch and kind of a step up above Season 1. It's very hard to notice if you're not really paying attention to it, but I do legitimately think the voice acting work was way better than Season 1 was. And Season 1 already had good voice work, but I think the voice acting just really stood out. It really did stood out to me, like when I was watching this first episode. Now, speaking of voices and lines, I love how Sid straight up steals Marry the vampire hunter's lines. Like, she's like, run if you value your life. The frenzy is happening. The blood moon is rising. She says all these cryptic one-liners to Sid, and Sid hears this. He's like, oh, that sounds really cool. Write that down. Write that down. And he legit, throughout the episode, he does it 2 different times. When he introduces himself, he literally stills the lines from Marry the Vampire Hunter to say that. Like, the frenzy is coming, the blood moon is rising. I'm just like, this rat! This absolute rat! He just stole the lines from the vampire hunter to make himself sound just so cool. I'm like, that's so funny, because it's just like, it's so much like him. It's so much like Sid in Shadow as a character to do that. I'm just like, I love this show, man. I absolutely love this show. And I think the stealing of the one-liners really fits so well narratively as well, because of just the very setting that the series is currently taking place in. I mean, it's taking place in a lawless city. A city without morals. A city without laws. You know, we literally have the introduction pretty much of the city when Sid enters it, into this ghoul getting beat, to Sid, you know, pickpocketing the pickpocketers. You know, we have these back-to-back things that happen throughout this episode that just showcases that this city isn't necessarily a morally good city. There's a red light district as well. And then, you know, even the top head honcho leaders that we see at the end of the episode, it's very clear that they fight for their own rules, their own thing they want. They're very selfish. Like, we have 3 lords going after each other. We have, like, this nine-tailed fox girl. We have this, like, bandit lord or whatever, barbarian guy. And then we have, like, a vampire lord as well that wants to resurrect the vampire queen. You know, we have 3 different factions just fighting each other, fighting for their own rule, their own objective, very selfish. It's a setting that really fits Eminence and Shadow. And I want to take a few moments to talk about that, because Eminence and Shadow is always this series about being edgy and using cliches and all this type of thing. And Shadow loves, like, darkness. He loves blood moons. He loves the edgy stuff and all that. Just, it fits his character. And being in a city to where anything can happen, lies and deceit is everywhere, he could just cut loose, do whatever he wants. And I would not necessarily be surprised at the end of this arc if Shadow Garden is actually the leader, like they rule over this lawless city. I would not be surprised whatsoever if that actually happens. Now, things could be different, but that's just my educated guess, judging by how this story goes. It's not trying to be anything, you know, I guess, thought-provoking. Like, the series follows cliches, let's be honest here, but it uses them. And so it's not really surprising if it goes down that route. It's just how we get to that route of how entertaining it really is. But, anyways, the point is that the very setting of this lawless city, it is just so perfect to really have these characters kind of in it and just interact with their environment and do different tasks and objectives, and maybe even Shadow do things that we haven't seen before, really being an absolute edgelord, taking down, you know, enemies, etc. And speaking of enemies, I do also want to talk about, like, I'm willing to bet you the vampire queen that's trying to be resurrected is going to fall for Sid. I'm willing to bet you. I am willing to put money on it. Like, I'll eat a hot pepper, okay, in one of my reviews for Eminence and Shadow, okay, like straight up a habanero or something, if I'm wrong. I will do that, because there is no way that the vampire queen is not going to fall for Sid. I feel that. I really do feel that's going to happen. Speaking of the story, though, that is something I do want to segue into. As for the story, something that really I am interested about, and light novel readers, do clarify. Don't spoil, but do clarify a few things, okay? I know that there's not a lot of content left to adapt, okay? And I know because of that, technically, we're probably going to only have this city, this arc, that's probably going to be in the anime. Like, this lawless city is probably going to be all the episodes of Season 2. Now, I could be wrong there. Anime only. But I believe that's where the entire setting of this story is going to take place. And if that is, it's interesting, because the very first episode of Eminence and Shadow, like this whole episode, feels very fast-paced. Like, a lot of stuff is going on. It is a nice setup episode, and I don't dislike the episode. I think a lot of people really love this episode. I haven't seen complaints or anything. But one thing that in particular that caught me by surprise is that a lot happened. Like, this episode has a blood moon literally happen. Ghouls are ravaging the streets, turning people basically into mindless undead, and you have a lot of people fighting and dying. It's like, it feels very fast-paced. It feels like to get to this very point within the story of Season 2, it would have taken maybe 2 to 3 episodes. But the fact that all this is happening in one episode, I'm just like, Okay, so how is this supposed to be stretched out for like 10 to 12 episodes for season 2 if it's just going to be focusing on this arc in this city? I mean, I'm guessing there must be something to do with the tower. Maybe going up the tower is going to take a lot of time or something. But Sid's so broken and strong, I just don't see it really taking that long to get up the tower. So the point I'm asking is just like, I feel like this episode, it has so much that happened. Now I'm just like, how is this supposed to last a lot of episodes? It feels like the way the story's going, this content will only last maybe 4 to 6 episodes at most. So I am curious about that one, but really good episode. I like Mary the Vampire Hunter. I mean, I like how it's very clear that Mary is a vampire. It's very apparent by the eyes, or has some form of vampire in her. We also have the introduction of maybe, I am assuming, werewolves. Like, I didn't mention this earlier, but that barbarian guy that appears and all that, you know, is fighting the fox, I'm assuming he is a werewolf, because he said, like, Frope or whatever at the end of, like, a name title in the middle of this episode, and I know about lycanthropes. Lycanthropes are basically werewolves, so I'm gonna take an educated guess, since we're in a vampire arc, you know, with blood and all that. There's probably gonna be a werewolf. I'm gonna assume he's a werewolf. I could be wrong there, but I'm assuming. It's very clear what, you know, the girl on the left is. She's a fox, the nine-tailed fox, and, you know, it could be multiple different representations. It could be like the Chibi, it could be Daji from Chinese mythology. It really just depends, but I am curious to see exactly how these characters are, and if they will join Shadow's side, or actually remain as his enemy. There's nice comedy sprinkled in throughout this episode as well, with great serious moments too. It's everything we know and love from Eminence and Shadow, and I'm all here for that. I really just love this show for everything it constantly delivers, and I cannot wait for episode 2 to come out next week. Wednesdays have definitely become amazing. Now, one thing I do want to comment on is this ending or opening song. Now, this is at the end of the episode. We have this whole song play, and I don't know if this is the opening or ending, so correct me on whichever one it is. But regardless, I'm not the biggest fan of this sequence because, for one, it's basically a montage of showing everything that's happened within the story and some of the things that is going to happen. And I don't know. I feel like this song, if this is the opening, doesn't feel as visually pleasing as how season 1's opening was. That's just my personal taste, but yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of this. I feel like it's a major step down, but that's not going to ruin the episode for me, so I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, Eminence and Shadow, finally back. And also, speaking of back, I like how the first thing we see, like, when it opens up, is this shot. Like, here, I'll play it. The first shot we see. Like, they know. Like, the animators know. They know what their audience likes. That's all I'm gonna say. But, I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, everyone, that, watched this video. I greatly appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts on Eminence and Shadow Season 2 and the return of it. Be safe, everyone. Stay healthy. Chibi out.